Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name's Luke, and this is Melissa. We're going to do sort of 10-ish minutes each on some of the work that we've been doing using the real world as an AR canvas, which essentially kind of means mixed reality. And I've put in a few sort of thought starters at the end of the presentation of things that I've been thinking about, which are kind of challenging when we're talking about these experiences. And hopefully they'll kind of engage discussion, and we can have some Q&A at the end as well. So if that's cool, I'll just get started.
Go for it.
So I've been mainly thinking about storytelling. So where I work at Nexus Studios, we're a storytelling company. And we've been doing a lot of work in VR and AR and more traditional film stuff for over sort of 20 years now. And there's been this interesting moment, which kind of got announced a little bit at F8 the other day, which is where we've been looking at kind of telling these AR stories. And for the foremost, they've been quite traditional AR stuff, and we'll talk about that and show you some stuff. But there's been a big kind of kicker that's coming, and it's been coming for a while. And you've seen it with sort of early products like the HoloLens. And then when Mark kind of demoed SLAM and the kind of AI work that's going into kind of recognizing environments, there's a kind of huge moment for us, which is these stories and experiences that we want to tell. What's this going to mean? If I can understand that environment, how's that going to affect the story that I want to tell? And obviously Snapchat kind of followed, or I think maybe they came first earlier in the day to try and showcase the technology they have. And I've been thinking, how are we going to use this in these experiences, and how does it not become sort of emoji-based, certainly to begin with? And I'm going to start by showing a really dystopian video. But basically, if we all get in our heads this understanding that the stories will be understand locations and environments, we have to kind of work out what that means. And I've got a short clip from a video of a friend of ours, which is a totally dystopian world, which essentially showcases what this could mean to us.
Adiós.
Olá, me llamo María.
Bueno. Hola otra vez.
It's full of great ideas, by the way.
Ay, no, cállate.
Okay, so if we take that as an example of what's possible if we can understand that environment, and certainly all the technology right now is allowing us to do that, and it's going to get super interesting as Facebook opens up its AR studio. We're going to begin seeing a lot more of this, and obviously a lot of this AI work is coming into computer vision libraries like Vuforia. So even yesterday they were announcing the kind of terrain tech. So I'm kind of mainly interested in if we were looking to kind of big stories, almost less kind of games, because a lot of sort of the emoji stuff will start, there'll be a bit of gaming, but I'm kind of interested in, and obviously this is biased to my side, but a little bit more like the kind of film experiences and the sort of mini short films that we can do. And we've been doing some great stuff in VR, so I think we're going to start doing a lot of this in AR, and some of this technology is going to be so relevant to us, but how do we kind of get into that? So I'm going to kind of like jump back a little bit. We've been doing AR for this sort of second wave of AR for about 2.5 years now, and I've been thinking a lot about this relationship between what is essentially the real world and then what is augmented. So it's a relatively old project we did with Christoph Niemann, who's a kind of well-known illustrator, for the cover of the New Yorker magazine. And it follows the traditional AR marker-based work that you've seen before. But one of the things that Christoph was really keen to do was he wanted to make the cover of the magazine essentially frame one of his film. So if I just play this, you'll sort of see what happens. So the image recognition is instant. So basically, frame one cover becomes frame two of the animated film. And then the experience unfolds into 3D. And I think what I want to take away from that is just this understanding that there was a relationship between the cover of that magazine. It was frame one. The second project, this comes with sad sorrows, but this was for the Obama administration and was actually about transparency in the White House and education, all those things that we've now given up. But back then, it meant something. So this is an app we built called 1600. This plays on the dollar bill. And it hopefully you might have seen this. It kind of blew up and was seen by a lot of people. And I'll just demo this very briefly. But this was a really interesting relationship where we had to kind of figure out, the brief from the White House was to essentially for free teach people a little bit about what goes on in the White House, and then transport this understanding of transparency. And the project didn't begin on a $1 bill. We talked about doing it inside the White House on the tour. We did some work tracking the outside of the White House building. And then in the end, when everyone got kind of really keen on trying to work out how to make this bigger, we started thinking about markers that were in everyday life. And actually, it's pretty quick that you get to currency. We started on the $20 bill. I hope no one's from the administration here. We started on the $20 bill because it has the White House, so it was going to kind of come out of the $20 bill. But then they said that was an expensive entry ticket, so it ended up on the $1 bill. But again, I think there was an important relationship between this understanding of accessibility. And in some ways, what I spoke about at the start of the presentation, we're getting away from that now, which is kind of exciting. And these are kind of crappy photos, but just the other day we ported it to the HoloLens. And this was a really interesting kind of experience because we start thinking about what does this mean? This experience was built to work on a $1 bill without much interaction. There's a few interaction moments, but it's quite small. When you port it into mixed reality and you place it in different scenes like this, somehow it doesn't actually have a relationship with the environment at all. And we're going to start moving away from these experiences into ones that do. Looks cute though. This project is called the Gruffalo Spotter. It was for the Gruffalo children's book. So in the UK, the Gruffalo book is sort of the most beloved children's book in the UK. And this is sort of this transition moment, I think. This project's actually dotted around the event, I think. And then we've just opened it up to be for people in the US to use it for the event. So this is like your one chance. It was built to basically run in 26 forests in the UK. And just like the book, you begin to find all the different characters along the way. So it's a really interesting project for us where we began to basically take the book, unfold it into the real world, and then place it in 26 actual live locations. And this is still using traditional technology in the markers. Let me just show you a bit of this. Also, for those that are interested, we actually took all the traditional film models and then ported them over. So traditional film models that weren't rendered in real time, we then rendered in real time. So the way it works is that you have to kind of search for the characters, and once you find them, you get a kind of rewarding animation, and then the parent holds the phone and then asks the kids to then stand in the picture with them. So like these are some of the photos I just dragged off the internet. This was huge in the UK. The Gruffalo brand's amazing. It had about over 1 million likes in a day. People are just obsessive about it. And I think, again, this relationship now, there's a sort of faux relationship with the environment, but it's pretty interesting when you start looking at the photos and get excited about the possibilities. And you can even see how the base of the tree sits comfortably on the ground. Again, this is all fake, basically. It's based on where the mark is positioned. But obviously, in mixed reality, we can move past that because we can understand the services. So I'm going to speed up a little bit, and just some of the things I wanted us to see if we could talk about it afterwards and just get into. So the first one is kind of this idea of mixed reality script. We did a VR project for Google Spotlight Stories last year called Rain or Shine, about a girl who receives a pair of sunglasses in the post, and when she puts them on, it rains on her. And I started thinking about this project and started thinking about what would this be in mixed reality. Here it's set in a square in East London. What if the square was real, but Ella, this character, she was rendered in mixed reality? And then what are the elements which would be in mixed reality, and what are the elements would be real world? For this project, we designed it around a square, which made it easy, and then we built something called a script board. So down the left, you have location. Across the top, you have time. And the yellow diagonal line is this sort of perfect story that we want to create. So in order to engage emotion and keep people fixed, because it's obviously real-time and interactive, I can plan where you look, and if you don't look somewhere, I can wait until you look there. So that yellow line is sort of the perfect 2 minutes, and then everything else, which we call subplot, can last about 10 minutes. And I've been thinking, like, what are the factors that we have to factor in for mixed reality when we're developing the sort of next stage of something like this? You know, there's so much work in kind of AI and recognition that we have to bring into that. So that's been a really interesting thought process. The next one is location. I think about it like three ways in some ways. So the surface-based recognition. So we've been putting things on tables. A lot of the HoloLens demos you see sit on tables. It kind of makes sense. And it can be any table, but it's a table. The other one is site-specific. This stuff gets me really excited. It's kind of a development from Pokemon, but it's like if you had the murder mystery in the Louvre, or the thriller on Beverly Hills, what would that be? You know, you'd have to travel to a specific location. The technology will recognize where you are, and the story would unfold within a specific location. And I think we'll see lots of work in this area as we get better at it. And the last one, I couldn't think of a slide for it, but it's just the idea of a dynamic story. So a story that changes based on the environment that you're in. And we see early beginnings of that, but the tech can fall down a little bit. But obviously, as we move forward, stories will just dynamically change to fix that location that you're in. Almost finished. The next one is communication. So in mixed reality, how are we going to interact in these stories? And I haven't really found a decent demo of this yet, but a lot of the work in AI and voice recognition, I think, will fulfill in here, where in mixed reality, it's a lot more normal for us to be talking or using our voice to interact. So there's a funny scene from Her, which I think just sums up what I've said, but also some of the experiences that we could have. So we watch this.
Okay, stop walking this direction. It's the other way. Thank you. Okay, the tunnel on the left is the only one we haven't tried.
No, I think that's the one you sent me down where I fell in the pit.
Okay, I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, this is different.
There's a lovely moment here where he moves from third-person view to first-person.
You know how to get out of here? I need to find my ship to get off this planet.
Fuck you, shithead, fuckface, fuckhead.
Okay, but do you know how to get out of here?
So there's some really interesting people who are doing a lot of development in AI characters. And again, I think in mixed reality, it makes much more sense. Just in VR, we're beginning to, with technology like Leap, we're looking to use our hands. I think in mixed reality, if I'm going to see the real world on top, I need to talk. And I think that's why you saw some of that integration in the HoloLens. And as I start thinking about more sort of stories in this space, then I want to be able to speak, I think. So that's a natural consequence. And the final one is probably the hardest one of all. And I've only got one slide because it's from Pearl, the VR Oscar-nominated film. I think it's the only VR experience so far I've really had sort of genuine emotion towards. And certainly in VR, we thought it was going to be hard. I think in mixed reality, it's going to be even harder. So how do you actually have genuine kind of emotional response to an experience in mixed reality? Because you've got so much more to contend with in the fact that you've got the real world there. You're not kind of immersed in it. So I think once we can kind of work out how to create emotion in a mixed reality experience, then that's the sort of, that's the peak. So I'm going to kind of end there, and hopefully that's kind of enough to kind of generate discussion in this area. Thank you.
So that's actually a great transition because I'm going to share with you something that hasn't been built, that's a project that is being designed to elicit emotion, but isn't really being designed to deliver story, which is our solve to that in this new space. This is a site-specific experience set in Chicago, bringing Zion National Park to Chicago as a mobile AR app. We're doing this because of this. The average American spends 93% of their life indoors, kind of a scary thought, but something we think a lot about at our studio is, with this emergent technology of AR, how can we start to address some of these experience disparities that are happening with people? How can we bring experiences that are really rich to cultures that wouldn't get them otherwise? So we were asking what-if questions at the outset of this. A big one for us driving this in the entire sort of user group that we're building it with right now in Chicago, the design challenge was, how can we bring an experience to a kid who has never slept under the stars in a way that might help them feel the power of the wilderness? This is the research that we did at the outset. Our partner with this is Cliff Bar, of all things, and they actually have an amazing body and brain trust of athletes, adventure athletes. And so we went out talking to these people, knowing that what they were taking from this place was not what a Red Bull kid on a surfboard was feeling. They were finding other connections to the environment that were really powerful. And we were hearing words like flow and epiphany and connection to the whole. So we started thinking, how could we, if those are experiences people are getting in the back country, and many people are stuck in the front country, how could we use augmented reality to create a middle country? Or what can a city kid who's never slept outdoors learn from her? That's Kate Rutherford, who's one of our muses on this, first 2 women to ever summit Moonlight Buttress, which is one of the cliff faces in Zion. This is Matthew, who's one of our other muses, who's in Chicago, and this is what he thought about the outdoors before he'd never slept in it. He had this conception that there was just going to be a lot of dirt, there was going to be nothing there, and it was going to be really dangerous because of animals, and he was terrified about being away from Wi-Fi. So there are lots of athlete adventure stories out in the world, but they're in traditional media, and we believe that because they're in traditional media, they're not getting outside the bonds of their traditional audiences. So if I'm a kid who's interested in climbing, I'm finding that already on YouTube, but if I'm Matthew, I'm not, because I'm not looking for it. It's not coming to me. So we are really interested in this moment of augmented reality because it feels like it's an opportunity to deliver deep learnings to people because they can experience them with interaction in their own body in ways that are deeply experiential and that they can create within those experiences. And so that's what we've been endeavoring to do with this project. This is some of the early concept art. We chose Chicago because the built environment was a really beautiful sort of echo of the natural environment in Zion. There's a gorgeous Riverwalk Canyon in Chicago, and Zion is a deep canyon as well. We also think that right now, even though the technology, we're building this for mobile, for phone, which is limiting in many ways. We just came off a project that we did for the HoloLens, and if everything could be built on that in this moment, I'd be thrilled. But this really was about accessibility and getting it out to a broad audience as a way of starting to user test this kind of story. Also, to your political point, it's a really, we feel like, incredibly important moment to be telling these kinds of stories in this country. One of the core design conceits in this project is that there is no blue dot. We're hijacking your Google navigation. And in part, that's because there's already tests that are sort of proving back from a cognitive level that us always being told to turn right, to turn left, is turning off part of our brain. And it's part of our brain that's really important to the formation of memory. I'm sure that this is true of you guys too, but one of the things we love the most about the mixed reality space is putting story and our relationship with the digital back into our spatial cognitive part of our brains, which is really deeply a part of being human. And so it's a great opportunity with this technology. This is our path. And so the story, to the extent that there's a story, arcs like this. There's moments of discovery where you learn sort of what the rules of this world are and what you can do within it, and there's lots of opportunity to create within it. There's a moment where it gets much more challenging, where you can't do the navigation if you're not committing to using a compass, which is something most people don't know how to do anymore. And then there's a part where we're really building in reflection. So that's our narrative arc, which is really different than sort of a narrative arc of a game or of a film. And this is our primary goal, that we're trying to seek to awaken these human traits that so many people take from the environment: curiosity, intuition, exhilaration, and play. And then I'm just going to lead you through some of the scenes that we're building. We're building against those core principles of adventure, which was that ginormous list that we narrowed down to a few things that we were hoping we could emotionally invoke inside people. Each person's going to experience them differently. They're not story-based. It's a question of, can anyone have a feeling of stepping into the unknown as they wipe through this portal between Chicago and Zion, discover their own way to transition through it, and sort of the surprise of what happens when they frame it up? We're giving them opportunity to develop skills and creativity in terms of how they capture this with their own photography, share it through their friends, and learn their way through the environment. And we're challenging them to really rely on their instincts. And the instincts we're asking them to rely on shift throughout the experience. There's times where you can't navigate if you're not listening closely. There's other times that you can't navigate if you're not looking closely. We're trying to figure out how to use the digital to reinforce that sort of multisensory experience, even though our portal to this magical world is so tiny. It's just a phone. We also, I'm sorry, I take that back, because sound is a huge component of this, and it's a 360 audio environment. And then there's a few experiences that we're giving people persistently, and this is about, again, the challenge of creating on a very small canvas, this very small window. This is a way in which if you discover any landscape inside Chicago, it gives you back Zion wildflowers, and that's something that's a persistent experience, both throughout the journey and then that you take with you in the app. These are some of the challenges that we're coming across, and this goes beta on June 15th, so it was interesting to see Unity putting forward the content bubbles in the keynote yesterday in terms of being able to bring real-world assets and game assets together. We've absolutely been struggling with that, and it's been fascinating, big compositing challenges. Markerless tracking, how do you make virtual objects really stick in the real world? It feels motivating and motivated. For us, one of the biggest challenges is how to be true to the source, because some of your story worlds are so beautiful, but we are doing a nature piece. And so if our mountain lion doesn't look like a mountain lion, we've kind of ruined our core intent of the project. And then one of the challenges we're having right now is the location component, not from experiential component, but we have a team in 4 different cities, and none of us are in the city we're designing for. And so I can't tell you how many times we're calling up people in Chicago begging for favors, because you come across these different bits of information you need from the environment you're designing for that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate till you dive in. And so this is back to Kate, our climber hero, and one of her scenes sort of nestling inside this sculpture in Chicago. And then this is back to Matthew, who did ultimately last summer get to spend one night outdoors, and this is what he had to say, which I think is amazing. This idea of waking up to sunlight, actual sunlight that's not streaming through a window, and how different that was, or this fear of falling off the edge of the earth because the stars were so big. So that's it. We also have Heroes downstairs, which is the piece we premiered at Sundance, which is from HoloLens, Gear VR, and it's a dance piece, and thinking about some of the same questions. How does AR give people a chance to be back in their own bodies? And how can you forge intimate relationships between people and digital content?
All right.
We have time for questions. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
Are there any?
No? No questions? One question.
Hi, that was excellent. I'm just curious on the second part for Cheyenne. Am I saying it right? Cheyenne?
Yes.
Pokemon Go had like security issues, where people were getting assaulted and stuff. So hopefully there's something that you guys are planning for that in Cheyenne, just doing a city walk and kind of being engrossed in your phone, maybe make sure there's something going around to make sure people don't get hurt.
Yeah, I
just
think
a
it's a
concern.
really good point. I mean, I've spent a lot of time around Pokemon Go because I've got a teenage son, and I would say that this is being designed to be much more of a heads-up experience. So it's acting a bit like a treasure hunt, but once you set your sights on the next point that you're trying to get to, your phone goes in your pocket, and you're in a story world of audio that's giving you athlete stories and Zion soundscapes. So we're not asking people to stay heads down at all, but we're piloting this in an environment that's pedestrian safe and that is very much already designed for public access. We would have loved to design it to be more adventurous for that, so you got that real sort of tension between the adventure of the city and the adventure of the story, but for exactly the reasons that you're saying, for this first small pilot, we're keeping it in a contained environment.
Yeah, it's a fair question.
Yes.
I have two questions. How did you get funding, and did you have to get permissions to actually augment the world in that environment from the residents there?
So our partners on this are Cliff Bar, and they're just adventurous, which is great. And we don't have permission,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
We don't. But it's interesting because it's just
Yeah.
those laws are just starting to come out right now. I mean, in fairness, Cliff is very friendly with the city of Chicago, and this is a gift back to the city, and it's going to have all the right partnerships. But I think it's a really interesting and good question. But I also think it's a great moment because that stuff it's not legislated yet. So it gives us all a chance to sort of define what could be possible.
I was thinking like if you made like a horror film and horror experience and then you put it somewhere, obviously that's being rendered either on the app or some of it's been rendered on a server. And actually, all you've done is put it in a specific location. Now, certain brands or clients might have a problem with the fact that you put that type of experience in that space. So it does raise loads of interesting questions because we're just going to see more and more of this, like specific location-based storytelling will be a big thing. There's lots of opportunity there. But yeah, you get into lots of kind of conversations about who owns that space and then, what they do in that space. And Pokemon Go, provoked that conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. Congratulations, it was beautiful work. I was wondering, I was inspired by what you had with the mapping and sort of the route planning for the tour and the journey. I was wondering if you guys have experienced anything related to Google Earth for prototyping or creating these demos in virtual space before actually going out into the real world, and do you have any recommendations about how to be able to plug in some of those Google Earth GSI information?
Do you want to speak to that?
No, I haven't done too much research into that. We've been looking at location proximity-based stuff, and I think my note on that is like 5G is going to be quite exciting for us because one of the benefits of 5G is that it gets us much closer tracking in location. So the GPS data, they suggest, can get down into kind of centimeter type. And currently on kind of 4G or the American equivalent, it's sort of 3 to 4 meter perimeter. So like we've been thinking about experiences where we'll probably just have to render stuff in front of you based on an estimation of where you are. But I'm definitely quite excited, and we're doing a bit of R&D in this now. In the future, when we can have much more accurate kind of data, what you can do with that. And very simple ideas are like if there's like 2 buildings like this, you could connect, in a kind of sort of Instagram, Snapchatty way. You could connect the buildings and kind of leave it there in space. And that's, I think that's kind of super exciting. But there's a lot of, you've seen a lot of the tech that's been incorporating some of Google Earth stuff, and it's all possible, but I haven't done much research in that.
We've been using it a little bit when we bump up against these problems of changing a location inside Chicago and then needing to go back in and look for that Chicago piece of that 360 content bubble. But I encourage you to stop by Heroes and talk to Thomas Wester, who's our developer, and he can speak to it with intelligence.
Hello. So this is primarily, I guess, a question for Luke, but both of you can answer this. So you showed that little dystopian AR,
Yeah.
and
it's called hyperreality.
hyperreal. Okay, so when I look at something like that, and I'm sure there are quite a few people who, when they look at something like that, they're probably saying, that's freaking amazing, but it's one of the scariest things I've ever seen in all of my life.
Yeah.
And right now, when I look at things like mixed reality, hyperreality, or what have you, right, a lot of the interactions or the augmentation seems to be on an application-like basis. So like, I pull up app X, and I augment my, reality for that, particular feature. I do see a world where we have some form of like augmented operating system running on some of our glasses or what have you. And in a scenario like that, where something like that becomes available, what do we do to prevent that from scaring people into using something for the greater good? Like, I don't really want to think about having a pop-up blocker for my glasses, right? And so I'm sure that as we're working on these types of things, I'm wondering if it's something that anybody has been thinking about in terms of ways to keep the experience, focused.
So right now, they're kind of sandboxed a little bit. So in some ways, that's good for us. So you have to download an app I tell you to download, and then you get that experience. So there's protection in that sense. The Facebook AR Studio, as I understand it, is going to use the camera function. So people will build apps within that function, but you'll still be using the Facebook platform. So if anyone grew up in web and remembers like the Facebook app horribleness of 2008 and 9, where creativity died in a box this big on Facebook, I wonder what that means. Like, is everything just going to be within Facebook and then you can't get out of that? And I think the world you're talking about is almost where like the platform or hardware that you're using is accessible to everybody, and then everyone has control over things. I'd imagine it probably won't work like that. It's going to be very specific to what you downloaded or what hardware you had. But you can't have these conversations about this technology without getting a little bit dystopian about the fact that if I'm going to understand the environment, I need a camera. If I have a camera, I can understand what you're doing. You just get there very quickly. So my hope is that, and I anticipate it probably will be, that it'll be kind of stuck to specific software and specific hardware. But that film maybe is like a good kind of grounding for everybody of where to avoid making us go.
But I would also say that, one of the things that's special about Unity is they're putting forth tools into all of our hands that are about how young makers, startups, et cetera, can really start to express worthwhile things in this space. And that's what's going to keep that from happening. I really believe that. If it's the next frontier of the media franchises, et cetera, or if it's all funded by brands, that is where we're going.
I'm only just a little guarded because people are saying that about.
You know what? I think they're turning our mics off because they need us to wrap. But
it says please.
we're.
We'll be here to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.